I was told to expect failure, all right? So I'm not weeping. I might weep later. But nothing has changed. You don't bleed to death from cutting the ulnar artery in your wrist. That, as a surgeon, many surgeons will tell you, doesn't happen. And that's what was said to have happened to Dr. Kelly. The other thing which hasn't changed is there's still no inquest. Do you understand me? Yes. There was no inquest worth its salt 8 years ago, or 8.5 years ago, and there's been no inquest today. All they've done is to refuse an inquest, all right? So the facts haven't changed. What we've been trying to do is to uphold the laws of our country. And I'm afraid the laws of our country have been trampled in this case because Dr. Kelly is unique for several decades at least in not having had a proper inquest for his unnatural death. Do you understand me? He didn't die of pneumonia. He died, we found him in the wood with a cut in his wrist and some empty packets of pills alongside. The thing is, the law that we saw today, or we were subjected to, was quite arcane. It was quite complicated, really. And but you have to keep saying, what's it about? And what it's about is that a man died unnaturally, as I've said, and a Lord Chancellor who also had another post. He was Secretary of State for Constitutional Affairs. He decided, whilst within a few hours of Dr. Kelly's body being found, he decided to have an informal inquiry, an inquiry without an oath. That's an ad hoc inquiry. Added another thing later called 17A. We can discuss that as well. Not enough time. But the thing is that he did it, the alacrity that Lord Falconer applied to this case was extraordinary. Consider the Chilcot inquiry. I call it the conversation because it has no law, nothing will happen. That started 6.5 years after they first started killing people in Iraq. 6.5 years. Kelly's inquiry, or at least the appointment of it, happened the morning his body was found. Work that one out. We know why it was done like that, because Falconer wanted to contain the inquiry so that everything was filtered, do you see? So the police didn't come forward with evidence saying there were no fingerprints on the knife, no fingerprints on the spectacles, no DNA or something. A lot of evidence was retained. And you say, why was it retained? If it was an inquest with suicide, these things would have come forward. We've had to prize these facts out one by one, particularly a man called Miles Goslett, a journalist, freelance journalist, and he has, through freedom of information requests, got these things out. It was mentioned today, but not in the right context, you see. What we heard today was a small part of what you would get at an inquest. If there was an inquest, it would run for about 6-7 weeks on this man, and then the country would know his death was properly investigated. At the moment, it hasn't been investigated at all, whatever you're told.
The government will certainly be hoping this is the end of the matter.
No, it's not. No. I can tell you there are millions of people in this country who were shocked by his death and remain certain that they haven't heard the whole story. I'm not saying that he was murdered. Maybe he was a suicide. But what we do know is the inquiry was insufficient.
I get the impression you believe it was a lot deeper than just...
I do. The story about him being the source, he wasn't the source anyway of this sexing up. We all knew the dossier was sexed up to justify the Iraq War. Millions of people knew that in this country. So that was a known, do you see? So it wasn't as if that was any great secret. But if you look at it is complicated really, but he had access to a lot of information. He had 5 hard drives in his house with encrypted apparently. They were removed by the police after he was found dead. And I feel he would have known what was being used in Iraq. And if you look at my website, the website of David Halpin, and you look at an essay I wrote, which was Tony Blair, my favorite person. That wasn't the title. Tony Blair, Questions Before Charge. If you look down the bottom of the essay, you will see some pictures. There's a picture of a lady in Palestine who's got shrapnel in her tummy, died. And there's a picture of a boy called Ali Abbas, whose arms were burned off, incinerated. So he's armless. He's back in Baghdad now. And that boy, Ali Abbas, his arms were incinerated by I don't know what it was exactly, but it was some type of nuclear weapon.
Right.
10 days from when the bombardment started. Ali Abbas, his mum and dad, and 10 relatives were incinerated in the same house that night. There's no weapon I know about which can cause that, which is conventional. And I think that Dr. Kelly might have known about this. Do you see what I mean?
Kinds of weapons.
Well, I think that don't ever believe that we don't use some pretty vile weapons. You know, what is a weapon of mass destruction? 1,000-kilogram bombs, where they're now talking about using nuclear-tipped bunker busters in Iran, you see? So I think Kelly might have known that. I don't know. But he was a very intelligent man, a conscientious man, I think, and I would suspect that he knew something that... This is, of course, assuming that there was foul play. We don't know that. What we need is a proper inquest. I was born in 1940. I was the eldest of 4 children. My sister, who's the second one down the line, was here today, supporting me and supporting this country. I'm a patriot, so is she, so millions of others. And we want the country to be truthful and not to be corrupt. This country is corrupt at the top and for a long way down, you know? To lie, when I was a little one, to lie was a cardinal sin. So when I see untruthfulness, when I see a lie, I have to react. And I cannot stand lies, hate lies. And this is why I've stuck with it. And I know this is a lie, this case, you see. Not necessarily. He may have taken his life. I think it's unlikely. The thing is, it hasn't been inquired into properly. So it's a lie. You must, if people are quiet in the face of untruthfulness, then they are lying with it. Silence is complicity. So that's what it really is. My upbringing, which I think was quite common in the war years and just afterwards, Second World War, we were taught to be truthful. And this isn't truthful. We are, as I say, in this country, mired, that's in the bog, mired in mendacity, in lies. There's lots of lies. PR is lies. In that House of Commons down the way, there's lots of lies. On that piece of paper, I'll say this actually, I'll just repeat it to you. It's, in fact, a nice little statement I wrote yesterday afternoon, and it says, "Hold this in your hearts." John Locke, who was the leader of the Enlightenment in Britain, said this in 1675, and I wish John Locke was here today. He said, "Where the law ends, tyranny begins." Now that sounds rather heavy, but in the spring, in the House of Commons, they bundled in an act called the Geneva Conventions Act, 1957. They bundled it in with another act, the Police and Order Act or something, and this is at the request of Israel. Yes, I see you nod. Miss Livni and other people had lobbied the parliamentarians of both sides, Labour and Conservative. They'd lobbied them to remove this act or to emasculate it, and it's emasculated. So the last person that they tried to question here under this act was Doron Almog. I was involved with it actually, with a very good solicitor called Makova. And they've emasculated it now. They have to go to the Director of Public Prosecutions to seek a warrant. But by the time they've done all that, they're on the phone and they've flown off wherever they're going to. Do you understand me? So you see what I mean, you see? That's exactly true. Where the law ends, tyranny begins. They've removed the law, and in that we now know that war criminals can be walking along here without any chance at all, really, that they will be apprehended and brought to book. So our world becomes more lawless, not just our country. So that's what I'm standing up for, is the law. We tried it today, a bit arcane, very tricky, pretty expensive. We haven't won, but nothing has changed with Dr. Kelly. His death remains improperly investigated. And as I said before, you don't bleed to death from a cut ulnar artery. That's manifest rubbish, as another surgeon told me.